There we go. We are live. This week's Warrior Mode live on YouTube with me, Kev Baker, and the main man himself, Mr. Bill Bean. How you doing, Bill? Another week has passed, another crazy week, and you look like you have gone toe to toe with one of the swamp monsters. What's happened, Bill?
I guess it's all part of spiritual warfare that bleeds into the physical sometime. I have a little cut on my nose, and I figured it was kind of like a catch-22. Do I come on with the cut exposed on the bridge of my nose, or do I just put a covering on it? That's what I thought I'd do, is just cover it over. So there you go. The spiritual warfare blends into the physical sometimes.
Well, I'm telling you, Bill, let me at him. I hope the other guy looks worse than you do. That's all I can say. But
no doubt.
we have got an amazing show lined up for tonight. But before we even get there, I'm still kind of catching my breath after last week's brilliant show with Cheryl Jones. I've had some amazing feedback on the back of that, but what have you heard on the back of that show, Bill?
Same thing. Just tremendous response, and everybody loved it, and it really was a great show. And thank you to Cheryl once again for being on with us. And it really generated a lot of great and positive response.
Now, Bill, we've got the guest. He's waiting in the virtual green room. But we like to start off every week by saying a blessing I hand over to you. And we say a prayer before we go anywhere. And especially with today's topic in mind, we're going to be exploring some of the darker corners of the supernatural. So I will hand it over to you. We'll get our prayers said, and then we will bring on today's guest, Bill.
Father, I thank you and praise you for this blessed and appointed time. And I ask that you bless everyone out there that is tuning in right now. And please keep them in your hedge protection 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for life, and bless this show. And Father, please work through us to present not only truth, but blessings to everyone that is tuning in. And we thank you and praise you for having Travis to join us today. And I have 100% faith in you that this will be a great and informative and blessed and very powerful show. We thank you and praise you for everything, Father. Glory to you forevermore in Jesus' name.
Oh, this is one show I have been looking forward to ever since you had kind of floated the idea by me. And it's been a show that really, Bill, I could have done many months ago. You introduced me to Tia. And at the time, I was also introduced to Travis. Now, we had talked about doing a show, but as I've come to learn during my journey, over 1,300 episodes of the Kev Baker Show, everything happens at the right time and for the right reasons. So I don't know how it took this long. But we're here now, and we've convened here today. And we're going to be joined momentarily by Travis Shortt. Now, for anyone who doesn't know Travis, he has been interested in the paranormal, the supernatural, and the occult since a very young age. He trained early in his life to be a minister, and he holds a degree in English with a concentration in communication from the University of Virginia's College at Wise, and is near the completion of, or may already have actually passed his master's in theology from Masters International School of Divinity. Now, his professional background is in broadcasting, marketing, and public relations, and Travis is the host, narrator, producer, researcher, and the writer of something called Dark Wings, the Mothman Chronicle. And that's why it makes him the perfect guest to bring on to the show today. So without any further ado, let's go to Travis. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Kev. Thank you and Bill so much for the opportunity to come on the show tonight and discuss Mothman.
Oh, brother, it's been a long time coming. You know from our exchanges on Facebook that this is a topic that intrigues me, interests me, excites me, and at the same time it scares me because I can't quite put my finger on what we're dealing with here. But before we get anywhere, Travis, I mean, tell the audience a little bit about who you are and how on earth's name a well-educated man like yourself became dare I say it, obsessed with the Mothman.
Well, some might even say possessed, depending on who you asked. Well, you know, as you said in the bio, I've always had an interest in the paranormal and the supernatural, and it goes back whenever I was a kid. I would sit up and watch reruns of Kolchak the Night Stalker with Darren McGavin, and I would watch that with my dad because he worked evening shifts in the coal mine as a coal miner. And we would share those moments of rewatching those old episodes, and I became fascinated with the possibility of supernatural and paranormal. And at the same time, I was being raised in an extremely evangelical Christian home. Attended a private Christian school for most of my primary education. There were 3 years that I was in a public school, but the rest of it was in a private Christian school. I joke a lot of times about the fact that I spent the majority of my life in that church building, because, you know, we would go to church, Sunday school at 10, Sunday morning at 11, Sunday night at 7. Then I was back in that same building for school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, back at church Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday. And if there was a revival going on, we were there at night as well. So literally there was one day a week that I was not inside that church building. So there was this combination of the religious upbringing, the Christian doctrine, and then this interest in the supernatural and the paranormal. And my personal, you know, kind of theological perspective is it's really difficult to say that you are a Christian and not have some belief in the supernatural and the paranormal. But you do find a lot of people that want to deny any type of supernatural element in life. And I think that it becomes very important that we have to, if you believe in God, you have to believe in the devil. If you believe in demons, you have to believe in angels. So I think you have to walk that line and have a balance in your theological and your spiritual belief system. As far as getting interested in Mothman, that happened totally by accident. Charley Mccracken and I, and Charley is someone I'll talk about at quite a bit tonight. Charley Mccracken was a lifelong friend, business partner for many years, and he was the director of Dark Wings, the Mothman Chronicle. Charley passed away last year, July 17th, July 18th, around 1 o'clock in the morning on July 18th, he passed away. But he and I had been in business together for many years, and we were in Las Vegas at the National Association of Broadcasters conference, and also we had an office there at the time. We had formed an alliance. Our advertising agency in Virginia had merged with Quantum Source Networks, another small production company in Las Vegas. We merged to become one full-service advertising agency serving the East and West Coasts. And we were there visiting clients and for the NAB, and our way to decompress on those road trips was to get out and drive in the desert. So we would drive out and we would visit ghost towns, and we went to the Grand Canyon, and just to get out of the city of Vegas. And one of the trips took us to Rachel, Nevada, which is where Area 51 is supposed to be. And we went to the little Alien and had grilled turkey and cheese sandwich, and we talked to the owners there, and we ended up at a place called the Area 51 Research Center. And do not let the name conjure up any type of really elaborate location. It was basically a Silver Eagle motorhome that was stacked full of research material, photographs, and debris that was reported to belong at Area 51. And while we were there, we picked up a book by Jerome Clark about, I think it was 365 unusual stories, a story for every day. And one of the stories was about Mothman. And West Virginia was the setting. We live in Virginia. Couldn't have been that far from us. West Virginia is not a very big state. So we made this mental note that at some point in time, if we ever had the opportunity, we were going to go to Point Pleasant, West Virginia. That was the year 2000. Fast forward about 3 years, and we were shooting a marketing film in Ashland, Kentucky. Picked up a road map, realized we were about 90 minutes away from Point Pleasant. We drove to Point Pleasant, made it an overnight trip. We didn't stay. We just drove up. We met with the people. We started talking, started researching, and then we drove back that very night and started laying the groundwork for this documentary film. We involved my cousin, Matthew Fleming, to help and work with us on the research. He did a great deal of the research with me, helped me write the script. He was there shooting with us. He's actually in a couple of scenes in the documentary and reenactments. But we worked on the film from 2003 to 2009. Took about 6 years of research and interviews and visits and recreations, CGI, narration. We shot reenactments with Revolutionary War soldiers for the Battle of Point Pleasant. It was a major undertaking for about 6 years of my life. So when you say obsessed, you're not far off, Kev. It became a huge part of my life for 6 years.
Well, you could have warned me, Bill, that this man has possibly the best radio voice in the world. Doesn't he?
He does, yeah. He's absolutely. There's no question about it. He is gifted, and he's gifted in many ways. Not only with a great voice, but intellect and the ability to connect the dots. So again, this guy's like a brother to me. He's top notch in many ways. So
well,
here
Travis,
you go. This is just a little sample.
Yeah, Travis, it was interesting there when you were talking about you can't have the dark without the light, the demons without the angels, and really that's probably what made me turn my attention towards the fact that there must be something on the good side out there, because so many of my shows, so many of the topics that we would cover, we certainly concentrated on a group of people, call them the cabal, call them whatever you will, that it didn't matter what I believed in, but they absolutely worshipped what we would call the devil, Satan, whatever name people want to put on it. And then over time, it should have really hit me sooner than that, but it dawned on me. The more people I spoke to, Joe Joseph, and then Bill coming into my life, and that's what really gave me an appreciation for the fact that there has to be God. If these people are worshipping the enemy of God, then I know that doesn't really make much logical sense to the scientific minded out there, but I'm like you. There's two sides to everything, and if they're that far to the dark, then there has to be the light as well.
Absolutely.
So, Mothman, then, let me start to interrogate you a little bit more on this. And for the audience out there, we've got listeners all around the world, Australia to Alaska, Norway to Nebraska, I like to say. And just give us the kind of history then of this famous case that led to the birth of something called Mothman.
I will do that. And I'm not ignoring or being rude. I'm actually messaging my daughter. I took my daughter to Point Pleasant this weekend, so I want her to kind of come and give a little insight for a fresh set of eyes going to Point Pleasant for the first time. She's heard the stories, but I just messaged to have her come and join me. You have to go back to November 15th, 1966 for the modern era of Mothman. Now, in the documentary, we do a timeline from the 1770s all the way to present time, outlining the things that had been going on in the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. But November 15th, 1966, in an area that's now called the TNT area, the McClintock Wildlife Preserve. It was a hangout for teenagers, a straight stretch of road. They would go and hot rod race out there. And there was a couple of teenagers, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and then they're accompanied by the Millettes, another married couple. And they were out there cruising around, driving around, and late at night on the November 15th, they actually see at the site of the North Power Plant, which no longer stands, something that was caught in a wire. And Linda Scarberry, who I had the pleasure to interview personally for the documentary film, described it as a 7 to 9 foot tall winged biped. She didn't say biped, but it was a 7 to 9 foot tall winged man with red glowing eyes and what she described as angel wings protruding from his back. They immediately drove Roger's 1957 Chevy at over 100 miles an hour back to Point Pleasant. The TNT is about 10 miles north of Point Pleasant. So they were driving in excess of 100 miles an hour. The frightening thing is this entity, and that's always the term that I use to choose. I very seldom will call it a creature. This entity flew after them, chasing them, and it actually scratched the top of Roger's car. There were photographs of it, or at least of the scratches. That started a snowball effect of sightings of over 100 individuals across countless counties in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, there on the Ohio River, Mason County, Kanawha County, Mingo County. They were people from all over the area reporting seeing this 7 to 9 foot tall flying entity. And that transpired for 13 months, from November 15th, 1966 until December 15th, 1967. And on December 15th, 1967, you have what is considered one of the worst natural disasters that ever happened on U.S. soil, and that was the collapse of the Silver Bridge spanning the Ohio River, connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with Gallipolis, Ohio. And a little bit after 5 o'clock on that December 15th, the stoplights on both sides of the river malfunctioned and stayed red, and there were cars that were lined up bumper to bumper. And shortly after, I think around 5:15, I would have to look at the notes again, but around 5:15, there was what was described as a sonic boom sound, and the bridge began to undulate like a snake. And then it split in two, and it dumped every car that was on the bridge into the Ohio River. 46 people lost their lives. 4 bodies were never found. And it was, at that time, one of the greatest natural disasters and tragedies to claim that many people on American soil. It actually spawned an entire infrastructure investigation in this country. It's prompted the Johnson administration to inspect every single bridge in the United States to make sure that they were up to code so that something like this could never happen again.
Now, Travis, I believe I think it was 13 months between the first sighting of
Correct.
the Mothman and then the bridge incident. There was numerous sightings in and around the area, and from a documentary I was listening just during the week, and I'll get your take on this because you've spoke to some of the people there, but
yes,
there was meant to be numerous sightings of the Mothman in and around the days before the bridge coming down, but also that in Point Pleasant itself, it was like a real buzz. Obviously everything and everyone was talking about this entity. And I'm like you, I'm definitely not going for creature, I'm going for entity.
yes.
But then the minute the bridge came down, it was almost as if, no, don't talk about the Mothman. You know, we're not going to talk about that now. Would that be fair?
It was very fair. One of the things that we found very interesting in our very first trip to Point Pleasant, which was in 2003, we stopped at the Mason County Tourism Office, which is right as you cross the bridge from Henderson into Point Pleasant. And we stopped to talk to someone and get some information. And they literally kind of laughed at us and said, we don't talk about Mothman around here. But if you want to go talk to some people, there's some crazy people on Main Street that'll talk to you about Mothman. And so we went and started talking. And it's one of those things, until very recently, it was not discussed in Point Pleasant. That was the feeling we got when we were there, spending 6 years talking to people. I would say that up until fairly recently, the town was almost divided on whether or not this happened and whether or not it didn't. And it's one of those things, talking to these eyewitnesses as we were bringing them on for the documentary film. And I'll say this because I've always said this: we never paid a single interview to come and talk about Mothman, because that tarnishes the objectivity and the credibility of the eyewitness. So no one was ever paid for any time working with us or doing the documentary or giving their testimony. And it was a very difficult process to get these people even to talk about the first sightings. It took several months of phone conversations with Linda Scarberry, talking to her daughter and her son-in-law, getting to know her. We spent an entire day with them just to develop a rapport before we even got to do the interview. And at the time, the Scarberry segment was shot in probably 2006, maybe 2007. So you're talking a good 40 years since the original sighting, and this woman was still terrified when I took her back to the site of the North Power Plant where she saw the entity for the first time.
So when you were talking to the witnesses, Did any of them mention that they may have had strange visitors, i.e., Men in Black type kind of characters?
That was actually what brought John Keel. You and I were talking earlier when we were doing the Skype test. That was what brought John Keel to Point Pleasant. It wasn't Mothman. He found out about Mothman after getting there. What brought Keel there was the numerous UFO sightings, the numerous encounters with Men in Black, the animal mutilations on both sides of the Ohio, in Gallipolis and in Point Pleasant, the stories of occult activity, witchcraft, Satanism, devil worship, all of these sensational stories that were being told. And he gets there, and he also ends up finding out, well, there's been sightings of a 9-foot tall flying man with red glowing eyes. So it really was the kind of this hotbed of paranormal supernatural activity. And one of the things I was talking to Leah, my daughter, who just came into the room, and I'll let her, if you want to ask her some questions, you can. I just want to get her to kind of give her perspective on the trip. Point Pleasant is situated at the convergence of two massive bodies of water, the Ohio River and the Kanawha River. And literally that is where Point Pleasant, the name, came from. It's at the point where those two waters meet. And Bill knows, and I'm sure you do as well, Kev, that in research and investigation into the supernatural and the paranormal, where you find two bodies of water meeting, for whatever reason, there seems to be an intensity in supernatural energy and in supernatural occurrences. And you add into the effect, or into the equation, the Native American history that permeates this land, and the tragedy behind Chief Cornstalk's death and the death of his son, and supposedly the curse that he uttered that this land would never find peace. And then you start, as we did, the timeline of tragedy, as we called it, from the death of Cornstalk in 1777 all the way to 2001, and you see a pattern of just enormous amounts of tragedy in a small town. The town of Point Pleasant has about 5,000 people. It's about the same size today as it was in 1966. The only time that it sees growth in numbers is during the Mothman Festival, the end of September, and it'll double and sometimes triple in size for that weekend.
Well, Travis, I need to ask you there, and it's going to be great to get your daughter's take on this as well. She's fresh from a trip there, but you mentioned Chief Cornstalk. Now, I've done a lot of looking into Skinwalker Ranch recently, because of the TV show that was on, and you find out about this curse with the Skinwalker. I've heard numerous kind of reports about this curse that Cornstalk put on the place. Me, I personally like to fall on the side that it probably was cursed, but what does your research tell you? Because some people contest that, don't they?
They do. And the one of the problems with the Cornstalk aspect is there's two differing accounts as to what happened. There's the account that he was fighting with the settlers at Camp Point Pleasant against hostile Native American tribes and was killed in the battle. And then there is the other version of that story, that he was killed, that he and his son were killed by the settlers themselves in retaliation for the death of some other settlers who had gone out on a hunting excursion. So you get these differing views as to exactly how Cornstalk died, but regardless of which account you believe, the end result is the same. Cornstalk and his son died, and both stories end with Cornstalk cursing the land to never find peace. And when you look, as I said, at the history, I think the history lends itself to the credibility of there being a curse there. Now, I'm not saying that Mothman is the manifestation of that curse. I think there's some other things that come into play here, especially in the research that we did. And, for example, my cousin, Matthew Fleming, he was hardline cryptid approach. He was believing at the time that this was a mutation brought about by the chemicals that were being stored at the TNT area, because that's exactly what it was built in the 1940s during World War II for the manufacturing and the storage of trinitrotoluene. And the igloos there still contained that and other chemicals. As a matter of fact, in 2010, the year after we premiered the documentary, one of those igloos exploded in the TNT area in the middle of the night. They're still that volatile. So, there are those that believe it's a cryptid, such as Bigfoot, such as the Loch Ness Monster. I don't fall into that category. I don't believe that Mothman is a cryptid in any form or fashion. There are those that believe he's an extraterrestrial. There are those that believe he's an ultra-terrestrial. That was Kill's original theory in a term that he went with. Kill also thought that he might be a tulpa, a mental projection of the individuals there in Point Pleasant from a time past, or an individual that existed in a parallel universe and was only able to be seen by certain individuals with heightened sense of intelligence and heightened sense of perception. So and that's one of the things I love about the Mothman is when you look at the supernatural and the paranormal events around us, even if you look at the 68 Bigfoot footage, of Bigfoot walking there in the mountains, as grainy as it is, it's a video captured that we're able to look at and we're able to study. Same thing with UFO phenomena. There's photographs, they may be blurry. There's video, it may be dark. There's photographs of the Loch Ness Monster or the supposed Loch Ness Monster. Mothman doesn't really have that from the 60s. There were no photographs taken. There was no video footage. Mothman, for me, is extremely powerful because it is a literal oral story that is being told over and over and over again by the eyewitnesses. And the thing is, the eyewitnesses, and you have to understand, Point Pleasant being a river town, it's a very small town. All of the towns there are fairly separated. And a lot of these eyewitness accounts were being reported from multiple locations at the same time. These people weren't talking and generating a story that they could share and that they were all on the same page. These were individuals that were seeing the same thing across countless miles of country territory that was undeveloped. 2-lane roads, if they were lucky, not a lot of phones, not a lot of modern communications, but they were all seeing the same thing. Now, there are differences from certain standpoints. Sometimes the height was different. Sometimes the color was different. Sometimes there were individuals that said Mothman seemed to be wearing clothes. Sometimes he appeared to not be wearing clothes. But, and this was a theory that I posited there in 2007 when I was presenting, I don't think that does any damage to the credibility because I don't think there was one single Mothman. I think there were numerous entities present in and around Point Pleasant, which is why countless people were seeing it. They were all describing 3 things: massive height, red glowing eyes, and wings.
And I like how you bring up the tulpa idea.
Yes.
And we talk about that a lot on the show. The Slender Man, probably the most infamous in recent times, but
yes,
it's almost the adverse effect of doing shows like this. There's a little voice in my head that says, Kev, you're throwing it out there into people's point of attention, their point of view, and that in itself could help to manifest this. But we'll take our chances there. And I want to bring you in, Bill, bring you into your own show here. I told you I would get excited when Travis was on. But,
well, it's everything he's saying. I mean, it's absolutely true, and I've dug into this quite a bit myself. And what Travis is saying, I'm in agreement with. My opinion, based on my experience, and I do believe that I had a form of this type of experience, and it took place in 2014 after I had performed an exorcism over someone, and I was going through this very large house. And got into the attic area where the attic was like, it was converted to like a large master bedroom. And there was one spot and I was not alone in this. I had young John Drenner with me and a few other people at the time. And it was John who alerted me to this spot. And it was a very dark area between a window and a ventilation shaft. And I looked over there, and it couldn't have been any more than 6 or 8 feet in front of me, but it was in the dark. Sure. And it was it had to be at least 7 feet tall or more, black figure with the glowing red eyes that looked like it had those types of wings. And I recall I had a Bible. I believe the Bible was in my right hand, and I had a holy mixture in my left hand. And I said, by the mighty power of Yahweh and his mighty and holy name, I command you to depart. And, I took real power and authority over it, and I took my mixture and threw it at it. And this thing let out a screech like I have never heard before or since. And it was so loud that it rattled the windows in the home and then departed. And I do believe that it was a Mothman type of creature because, in my opinion, I believe that they are fallen angels.
Well, I was going to ask you, Bill, we look at the film The Exorcist, and it's got, I believe, Pazuzu. That's the demon that's represented there. Have either of you guys looked into the hierarchy, the kind of the legions of the demons that we know, to see if anything lines up with the description of, or what people describe as the Mothman? This could be like an actual literal demon that maybe we know about.
Go ahead, Travis.
I was gonna. It's your show. I was gonna.
Everyone's now thinking, where do we find a description of the demons?
I have dug into it, but I wanted Travis because I want to hear what he has to say about it.
One of the things when I did. Started doing the research into the film, and then when I started being asked to come and speak at the Mothman Festival, at that time, you're talking 2000, I think 2004, 2005 was my first presentation there. No one had really posited any theories outside of it being a cryptid or it being an extraterrestrial or an ultra-terrestrial. So what I posited at that point was exactly what you were referencing, Kev, which is that it could be a demon or a fallen angel or a Nephilim. And I reached out to Dr. L.A. Marzulli, who is the author of the Nephilim trilogy, which is actually a work of fiction, but it's based on his own research into the offspring that was generated between the coupling between fallen angels and human women, which created these giants that many people believe Sasquatch and Bigfoot is also a remnant of that coupling between humans and between humans and fallen angels. There were interesting things that came up as I researched. One of the things when my presentation was called "The Mothman Sightings: The Religious, Spiritual, and Cultural Implications," and if you look at cultures across the world, various religions, there are always references to winged entities. The Christians have angels. The Jewish faith has angels. The Islamic faith have angels. We have demons. You look into the Mesoamerican people; they had Quetzalcoatl, the winged feathered serpent, who brought knowledge. And if you look at the literal interpretation in the scriptures, the order of angels that typically are shown to have wings are the seraphim angels and the cherubim angels, but the seraphim especially, and seraphim means fiery serpent.
Yeah.
So my personal theory is that Mothman is somehow connected to that particular hierarchy of angelic spiritual beings.
Yeah, and we've got a good friend of ours, Jason, First Paranormal on YouTube. He came on and talked about the Owl Man of Devon. And like the Bigfoot, it's got its local variations. You've got the Yowie in Australia, you've got the Yeti, you've got the Bigfoot, the Skunk Ape. Goes by many names. And I think similarly, what we refer to as the Mothman of Point Pleasant, it can be seen anywhere. Because like you're saying, Travis, I speculate, Bill, it is some kind of demon that can take that form. It may even be able to take multiple forms, because you think of some of the other stuff going on in and around Point Pleasant at the time, Travis. It seems to me, again, I'm just speculating here, but it sounds like almost a portal has opened for numerous things to come in.
Well, another interesting thing that we discovered in the research, the TNT area, as I mentioned, was built, occupied, and shut down in a series of very short years during World War II. It was built by a group of government contractors who built this facility. They immediately left Point Pleasant, and they built Oak Ridge, Tennessee's nuclear facility in Oak Ridge. And then the research and the conversations that we had with some individuals who had worked at that location in Point Pleasant at the time was that group went from there to Groom Lake, Nevada, and started building what is now Area 51.
Interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting.
And so you have this governmental tie now. You also have the concept, the theory, the idea that Mothman was something that was conjured by some activity that was going on in the TNT area in the 60s, because at that time, and even in the early 2000s when we were going, there were paranormal groups that we would meet with and talk to, and we would go on hunts in the TNT area. They would not go the month of October. They would not go into the TNT area at night in the month of October. They said there were still satanic and occult activity that was going on there, and they refused to go in.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to that place that I've frequented a couple of times near Loch Ness, Bill.
Yeah,
Very much like
yeah.
Boleskine House, right? Because there's still evidence that that's been used by groups. And now, of course, you've got the Boleskine House Foundation that are going to restore the house to its previous creepy glory. And they're going to be teaching Thelema to local children and anyone who wants to go for a spiritual holiday. That won't end in tears much, right?
Just nothing surprises me anymore, Kev. And, may it have the same result as what the most recent result has been. So we'll place it in God's hands, and may God destroy that thing again.
Well, Travis said...
Here's something, Kev, that I wanted to ask Travis. And this is something that you and I have talked about before. Travis, were you ever able to confirm that there were sightings of the Mothman on the day? I had read in several places that in my studies that there were some eyewitness accounts of people seeing the entity on top of the bridge before it collapsed that day or evening. Were you able to get any type of feedback or confirmation on that?
There were individuals that did claim to see Mothman at the bridge. There were also individuals that saw men in black the day before, like inspecting the bridge. They described them as kind of being down as low as they could get near the Ohio River, and it looked like they were inspecting or investigating or looking at something. That was the day before, and then there were those that did see the Mothman on the bridge fly away just as there was that sonic boom sound. Yeah. And then the bridge collapsed. Yes.
Isn't that interesting? And Kev, you and I talked about that a long time ago, and it just came into mind. I thought I better ask you that now before I forget about it. But go ahead, Kev. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. But Travis, quite interesting because I mentioned Boleskine there, and
yes,
the whole of the Great Glen, as the audience have come to learn, that whole area, it's one of the most supernatural hotspots ever. And you get all sorts of different activity, ghosts, shapeshifters, the kind of things we have in Scottish mythology, all the way to fairies. But you mentioned Point Pleasant as well, and it's interesting because you've got the satanic activity going on there. Mm-hmm. The potential for almost to be not connected physically, but another portal, like I refer to Boleskine House up that way. It's almost porous between this world and the next. And you mentioned to Bill there about the men in black, and I want to kind of drill down on you on that for just a moment, if I may. What was your takeaway after speaking to many people in and around the area? I know John Keel, he was really into the men in black kind of phenomenon, but what's your research led you to think about that?
Well, the research that I did on the Men in Black, as I said, there were eyewitnesses that claimed to have seen them. Now, we only had one encounter that was strange, and that was driving back one night from Point Pleasant. And it was myself, Charley Mccracken, and Matthew Fleming, and we were driving back. I had an Odyssey minivan at the time, and we're driving back actually trying to remember which direction we were coming. I can't remember if we went through Huntington and Ashland and hit 23, which I think we did. I don't think we went back through Bluefield, West Virginia, and then down into Buchanan County, Tazewell County, Virginia to get back home. I think we were on 23 at this time. And I'm driving, and all of a sudden there are headlights in the rearview mirror. Hadn't seen anything. So obviously the car was driving with no headlights. They got up behind us and turned their lights on and followed for a little while, and then they immediately passed and drove on. I drove for a few miles and never saw a car, never saw anything. A few miles later, the same thing happened. Driving along, nothing behind me. All of a sudden, headlights come on, follow me for a little while, pass me, and they do that about 3 times. So that is a common thread in a lot of the Men in Black stories. That is the only thing that we had happen that I would say made me think that there was possibly some MIB activity. Now, interestingly enough, if you've read Keel's The Mothman Prophecies, which is a very stream of conscious type of storytelling, it's like small separate stories that all build up to and kind of interconnect at different points as he's telling the story.
I was kind of expecting it to be this huge piece of work on the Mothman, and you have to get to like 3/4 of the way through the book before it even gets to the Mothman, you know?
It is. It's like all of these different little components that all kind of, he finds a way to make them all connect. But the individuals there, and Jeff Walmsley, who has written 2 books about Mothman, and actually I'm going to do just a shameful plug here. I picked this up this weekend, the Mothman Museum there on Main Street in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. If you ever get to Point Pleasant, stop by the Mothman Museum. Jeff, in his research and in the interviews that he has done, Linda Scarberry and a couple of other, and the other interesting thing was there were some very strange pregnancies that took place during the Mothman sightings. Some children were born that had supposed exceptional intelligence IQ, and Linda Scarberry's daughter was one of those, and they became the focus of Men in Black, and they would show up at Linda Scarberry's home, and she asked Keel what she could do about that, and Keel gave her a very interesting piece of advice, and he told her to always keep a crucifix on hand.
Very interesting.
Yeah, Keel was convinced that all of this was evil in nature, including the Mothman, and so again, what Travis is saying, I've studied that for myself. Yeah, so I believe it.
Yeah, that book, it's almost like his journey to arrive at that kind of conclusion, isn't it?
It is very much a journal, is exactly what it is. That's the way that I've described it to people. It is very much a journal and a chronicling of his time as he was investigating not just Mothman, but Point Pleasant in general. He was fascinated by it, as I have been. That's why I wanted my daughter to go. I wanted her to see what Dad had spent 6 years of his life doing.
And we'll get her on in a moment. We'll find out what she made of it. But you mentioned there's been winged entities mentioned throughout history, but do you think that you've been able to nail down any earlier definite Mothman type activity, or would you argue, or would you say that 1966, it's a horrible year for Scotsmen. It's the year that England won the World Cup and they never let us forget about it. But I'll remember it for the Mothman now. So
I'll see if I can work that into the Mothman tragedy timeline. I will for you, Kev. I'll see if I can put that in.
It's a Mandela effect. Maybe they won nothing. But what do you think? Does it stem from there, or would you say this was a phenomenon that's been around for a lot longer?
I would say it's been around for a lot longer for a couple of reasons. There were earlier sightings in Point Pleasant, some as early as the 1960s. There are some that took place a couple of nights before the official sighting, some strange things in the sky that were seen. Excuse me. But if you, and I know, Bill, you're familiar with Nick Redfern, and I'm sure you are as well. Yeah. He's done a lot of research into he actually has a book, the ABC Monster book, that he's written, and it kind of chronicles various entities and creatures that have been sighted. And he's got, there was a Batman sighting in Texas in the 1950s, Spring Hill Jack from London, England, and the English countryside from back in the Victorian era. Very, very similar sounding to Mothman. Tall individual, black, red glowing eyes, could leap and bound. And of course, individuals have speculated, it was a kangaroo or some other wild animal. But I think when you go back and you look, and if you have a very objective mentality and you look at things in history, then you start seeing, well, there are some other instances where very similar sightings have occurred. In Redfern's book, he also references a sighting in Vietnam in the 1960s. Two individuals that saw a winged female that was totally pitch black, but was winged and was totally unclothed. But she flew overhead of them. So much so they could see her and make out all of her distinguishing physical characteristics.
Bill, there's too much smoke for there to be no fire when it comes to the Mothman type entity. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree, Kevin. Again, I think I've had a personal experience with it, the time that I engaged in spiritual warfare against it. So I absolutely believe that's what that entity was, that was just 6 or 8 feet in front of me. And furthermore, on the day of 9/11,
yes,
there supposedly were sightings of the Mothman there before everything kicked off there.
I have heard that, yeah.
Furthermore, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I've seen a photograph that floated around the internet for a while. I submitted it to several different individuals who could not prove that it was a hoax. It does seem to be a very legitimate picture of a winged humanoid flying in between the trade centers before they were hit with the first of the attacks. Now, interestingly enough, the last timeline piece that we include was 9/11, 2001, because the aircraft that flew into the Pentagon, we looked at FAA flight traffic reports, and based on the latitude, longitude, location of that plane, when it was hijacked, it was directly above Point Pleasant, West Virginia, when it changed course and flew back into the Pentagon.
Very interesting.
Oh, that is bizarre. Now, Bill, I need to ask you here, because you've dealt with a Mothman-esque type entity, and you're one of the handful of guests, and I get a lot of guests that come my way, but very rarely do any get interfered with the way that you do. We've heard it on air here with helicopters. You've showed me stuff off air. Stuff
and Travis knows all about it as well. He's known that I've had this type of...
The reason I bring it up is because when you've got John Keel, his advice to somebody was have a crucifix handy. You find that the Men in Black, the Mothman, they almost go together. They're almost connected in some way. And here you are, Bill. Honestly, you're the most harassed person I know when it comes to these Men in Black. Call it whatever it is, right? We have usually the most issues on Skype, the helicopters. Why is it then you think that, or where do you think the Men in Black come from? This might sound silly to the listeners, but do you even think they're human to begin with? Or do you think they're of the order of the supernatural kind of stuff?
Absolutely. And I had an encounter with a Man in Black, one of those types of, again, I'll say entities. And that was back in the late 1990s. And I'll never forget it. And I arrived at this residence. I was back at that point in time. I was actually working 3 jobs. I worked in the bar business, and I had a lawn landscape business going, and I also was a bodyguard driver for the CEO of a company. And so I was very, very busy. And on this one particular day, I was going over to cut a lawn at this residence that was not occupied. It was in Glen Burnie, Maryland. And the individual lived in Virginia, but he rented out the home, and so the previous tenant had moved out. He wanted me to maintain the lawn until the new tenants moved in. So I arrive over there one day, I don't know, probably 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, somewhere around there. And I noticed when I pulled up, there was a utility truck parked in front of the house, and no markings on it. It was a white utility truck, no markings on the doors on the truck anywhere. No company name, no numbers, nothing. And the guy was in the bucket, and he's up on the utility pole again, which is in front of the house. And so I'm unloading my equipment, getting ready to, start cutting this lawn. And the guy comes down, the bucket comes down, and just looking at this, what I thought was a man, in the bucket, he had on these very thick black sunglasses. I mean, like extra thick. It was very strange, very pale, white skin. He was dressed in, he had like, wasn't dressed in black. He had like, I think it was like a brown or tan camo cargo tactical type of pants so it was like a military type of dress, and it was like an olive green type of t-shirt. And he comes down, and behind my mower, and I'm kind of like probably 12 feet away from him. And I remember saying something like, "How you doing?" And he mimicked it back to me. Very robotic. The response was very robotic right back to me. Almost like, think of like Terminator type of thing. And so then he gets out of the bucket, and I'm just kind of standing there at this point. I know something is very off. And he just puts everything away and gets in the vehicle and goes. So inside, I'm going, wow, something is definitely off here. This was very bizarre. So I speak to the homeowner later that evening, and I told the homeowner, hey, you had a utility guy out in front of your house and all this. And he says, well, I don't understand that, because there's no power on in the home. There'd be no reason for a utility guy to be there on the pole in front of my home, because there's no power in the home.
Well, Travis, this is very much like the accounts that John Keel took from people. Just pure
Yes.
weird, bizarre. There's nothing normal about interacting with the Men in Black.
No, most accounts of the Men in Black, very different than Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith. They are, as Bill said, the voices are very robotic, almost inhuman. They are described as almost being translucent in appearance, very striking physical features, extended digits, fingers being extremely long, sometimes having six fingers instead of 5. The smell of sulfur is almost always associated with the appearance of Men in Black. They often show up again, in a difference to the Hollywood version, they most often show up in groups of 3 instead of 2. It is in very, very, again, and they always seem to have this very, very bizarre affinity for time. That was one of the things that they kept asking people in Point Pleasant when Keel was interviewing them. They would want to know what season it was or what time it was, and they would often end their conversations with the very cryptic phrase, "We will see you in time."
Yeah, really bizarre. Now,
Yes.
one of our listeners, Stephen, big shout out to you, Stephen. I was actually going to ask you about this, but I'll bring it up now. The most recent spate of recent Mothman kind of sightings that I can think of. To note, you may be able to update me, but it was in and around Chicago. And we've
Still happening.
yeah, we've got
Yes.
Stephen here, who has actually said to us that Mothman was on my roof in Chicago. I fell on the floor and listened.
Believe
Mothman
it.
took off, and a huge gust of wind came in through the windows. The Chicago thing, I was actually shocked to find out it's still going on. I thought it had kind of abated, but
No.
yeah. Any update on this, Travis? I mean, have you looked into that kind of spate of sightings in that area?
I have just started, because when we were doing the documentary film at that time, the hotbed of activity was Wise County, Texas, and they were having a lot of Mothman sightings. And for those that are unfamiliar with Wise County, Texas, it actually has a very small town called Aurora, Texas in it. And Aurora, Texas is considered by many ufologists to be the first UFO crash on American soil prior to Roswell. It took place in 1897. So 50 years before the Roswell incident, there are those that believe a UFO crashed in Roswell. In Aurora, Texas. So you have again another tie between Mothman and ufology and UFO sightings and a supposed UFO crash. Chicago does seem, and this has been the case for honestly, it's probably been going on for close to 6 years now, if not longer.
I was just going to say, you're right, Travis. I think it is 6 years. I think it was 2014 that we first started hearing about this.
And it's kind of been an ebb and flow. There are sightings, and then it kind of backs off, and then there are sightings again. Now, the one thing, and this was mentioned in the Mothman Prophecies movie, Keel talks about it in his book. It's one of those things that obviously is very true for the town of Point Pleasant. The sightings of Mothman always do seem to be, in some form or fashion, a precursor to a huge, devastating tragedy.
Yeah.
It's almost like some kind of omen that turns up beforehand, right?
A forewarning, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and, not only, and when we think about these types of things, of course, when you think West Virginia, you think rural area. But some of these sightings in the Chicago area were in the city limits, to where people, I can think of a couple off the top of my head, to where people were coming out of restaurants.
Yes.
And they would see the entity standing across the street under a street light on a city street. And so, I mean, that's a whole other level, just like seeing the entity in New York City before the 911 event takes place. You're talking highly populated areas. So that is far removed from the rurals of Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
It is. And if you look at the sightings from 66 to 67, yes, the original sightings were by two teenage couples. Afterwards, there were doctors, lawyers, school teachers, police officers, people from every walk of life that were seeing this entity that we now call Mothman.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really struck me when I was, I listened to the audiobook version of John Keel's Mothman Prophecies, but I always kind of emphasize that we're going back to the 60s. It was a time when, there wasn't any dopamine hits to be got from making up stories. There was no clickbaiting. That wasn't a phenomenon then. In fact, there was nothing to be gained, Travis, in that time or age by... A, coming out, and then B, almost like making a spectacle of yourself, talking about it all the time. There would have been more of a tendency to maybe keep quiet, I would imagine.
For the ridicule factor.
Yeah,
Travis,
absolutely.
I'm sure you could elaborate on that those people probably were still very uncomfortable talking with you for that very reason.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that, again, lends itself to the credibility of these eyewitnesses, is they never received fame, fortune. They were never treated as you said, Kev, heroes or anything like that. But they were met with ridicule and scorn and being made fun of and being ostracized, to the point that many of them, not all of them, but many of them, ended up developing serious mental health issues, chemical addiction problems, countless marriages ending in divorce and tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy. It's just one of those things that, and again, like I said, it took weeks and months many times. And Linda Scarberry, it took a very long time to get her to come on and talk to us. Roger Scarberry, her husband, who did report to the police that night, just as she did, what they had seen. Roger has never, ever, since 1966, gone on and been interviewed in any form or fashion about what he saw. We even approached him to let us conduct an interview just for posterity's sake, And we told him that when we left, he could have the copy that the master before we walked out. But we wanted him the opportunity to actually be able to tell his version of the story, and he still refuses.
That speaks volumes. It really, really does, you know. Now, any of the other witnesses that you spoke to, Travis, was there any stories that really stood out when you were taking down their testimony?
Nothing that really jumped out, with the exception, because I asked Linda when I was interviewing her, because she was very specific in her account to the police when she was filing her report, that what she saw were angel wings. And I specifically asked her, why angel wings? Because there's so many other ways you could describe wings: bat wings, bird wings, moth wings, but she chose angel wings. And she said that the entity that she saw was like a tall, slender, yet muscular man who had angel-like wings that were ashen in color.
That sounds like some kind of fallen angel entity. I'm sorry, it really does, doesn't it?
It you know, and there have been, you know, was it a crane, a sandhill crane? You know, I grew up in the mountains. I've seen cranes. As a matter of fact, the area that I grew up in, where my parents still live, is called Crane's Nest River. There were countless cranes in the area. They thought it was a snow owl. There have been all kinds of animals they've tried to attribute this to. I've yet to see an animal that stands 9 feet tall, looks like a slender, muscular man with angel wings and red glowing eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing, that profile, that silhouette, you know, that's quite unique, the angel wings. I can see where that person's definitely coming from. But
and
Bill,
Kev, you mentioned something. Kev, you mentioned something earlier about that Slender Man thing. Yeah. And really, when you think about that, it almost makes you wonder, if in fact there isn't some type of, you know, correlation in there. It sounds similar to the Mothman thing in some ways, and then in other ways no, but it just makes you wonder. And again, if it is demonic and it's coming from you know, the satanic kingdom, then perhaps this other entity, this Slender Man, whatever, then there is sort of a loose link there to where they are coming from the same source anyway.
What would you say to that, Travis?
I would not discount it. I think when you look at the mythology that has been surrounding the Slender Man, you know, the description is a tall, pale man with what has been described many times as almost multiple arms coming out of his back, and that could very easily also be manipulated into be looking like wings. Yeah. As well.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to bring your daughter on then? Do you want to squeeze up there?
She is sitting right here, so I'm going to stand up, give her the microphone and the headset, and
now,
you guys.
What's her name before you leave us?
This is Leah Shortt.
Okay. So we're going to talk to Leah now. This is going to be interesting, Bill, because Leah's just back fresh from a trip to Point Pleasant. And it's going to be interesting to find out what it's been like for Leah. Growing up with her dad, who's absolutely like this expert in the Mothman. So Leah, welcome to the show.
Thanks
Hi,
for
Leah.
coming on.
Hi.
What's it like, first of all, having a dad that is absolutely an expert on all things Mothman?
It's interesting to say that. You know, I mean, as a kid, I would lay in bed with him and watch his documentary as much as we could. And I would tell, once I knew to the extent that he was knowledgeable on the subject of this entity, that I would tell people at school. I was like, you know, have you heard of this thing, and have you heard of my dad? And I would spend time Googling him to see, you know, how he was represented in this way that he was known to people interested in the supernatural and in this creature.
So before we talk about your trip to Point Pleasant, What did you make of it yourself? What's been your take on the Mothman? Do you think it's demonic, extraterrestrial? What's been your kind of idea around it?
I do favor my father's theories into that it's more of a spiritual or supernatural entity. But I don't have his firsthand experience into any investigations or into any interviews with these people who know far more than I do about how it looks or how it behaves. But I do like his theories that it is a harbinger of death of sorts. And I think it could, at this point, be anything, but I do like his theories.
So what do your friends, what did they make of it? I know my son, he used to get really embarrassed because his dad was on YouTube and he was doing shows like this. But what did your friends make of your dad's documentary, and what did they say about the Mothman?
They found it very interesting. I have friends who are very into supernatural elements, and the reports of cryptids and creatures known to wide populations. I have one of my friends is very interested in animal behavior and in creatures that we may have not found, and so he likes to think that it is a cryptid. My friend Alora thinks she thinks of it more as an aura, is what she said, and a manifestation of energy.
I like that. I've often wondered, Leah, if maybe sometimes it appears as a Mothman, and then that same energy, maybe for I don't know what reason, next time it'll be a Bigfoot, and next time it could be something else. So I think I'd probably go along with what your friends kind of say there. But you're just back from Point Pleasant. Tell me, how was it? What was it like to be there?
It was very interesting. It was fun to see all these places that my father had countless stories to tell, and to go deep behind the scenes of this documentary and tell me, how he interviewed people, what sort of challenges he faced in getting them to interact with him and to speak with him. And it's a very interesting town. It does have this sort of underlying sense of sadness almost, in that everywhere you go there are stories and documentation of these tragedies that have taken place due to this entity that they are associated with almost for life now.
So are you going to be following on in your dad's footsteps? Are you going to be picking up the Mothman chalice in the future?
Can't say that I will. I don't know if I could do it as good as he does.
Well,
but
Leah, I tell you, you've got a voice for radio. She sounds more accomplished than me and you, Bill. Right?
Yeah, she's brilliant, just like her dad.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before I let you go, then, I mean, your final thoughts on really what you think this is, just to summarize what your take on Mothman is, and basically, your whole takeaway from this Mothman experience. Now you've been there as well, Leah.
It is very obvious when you go there that from the culture and the way people will look at you and the way people will talk about it, that they have seen something, or that they so strongly believe that they have seen something, that it's very hard to, from a point of view that you have not experienced it, to say or to discount these people. It is something that is very prominent in their lives, and to just say, I don't believe and that this thing isn't real, is just something that you can't humanly, in any good mind, do, in any right mind, to tell them the way that you know your town, the way that you have known your history is not true, and it is not right. And so I do believe there is something. and whatever it may be, I think is still up for debate. But I do agree with my dad, which,
I think
good for you, and that's a good stance to take there, Leah.
Big time. And Leah, I think your dad will probably uncover more information about this Mothman on the way. So I want to thank you for coming on today, for sharing that with us, and all the best in the future, okay?
Thank you for having me.
No, anytime, Leah. That was brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
God bless you, Leah.
Thank you.
Hey, at 16, I wouldn't have been able to do that, Bill. I'm telling you.
No way. That was impressive. So Travis has done well. And obviously, Travis, congratulations. Thank you. A very educated young lady there. And,
she is.
Yeah, so I'm sure you're very proud.
So
I am very proud of her and my son, both.
So,
fantastic.
Travis, what's your hopes then with Mothman? You're going to get to work again on a documentary, is that right? You're going to kind of redo that, or what's the next step?
It's funny, when we did the original documentary, the original cut was 5 hours. And we're not Peter Jackson. This isn't Lord of the Rings. No one is going to sit and watch a 5-hour documentary. So we started scaling back, and there was just so much information that we gathered that started creating other stories. There was a location, you were talking, Kev, about the location there around Loch Ness. And all of the activity. Well, there was a facility just north of the TNT area in the little town of Lakin, West Virginia, called and it was a huge brick building. It had been a mental asylum, and it was actually one of the most spiritually active places I've ever been. Doors opening and closing by themselves, footsteps, screams, children's voices, windows opening and closing, temperature drops of 30 degrees measured with a digital thermometer on camera as the temperature would just plummet 30 degrees. Shadow people, I mean, just all of this spiritual activity. And what's very interesting is the background and the history is that it had been a mental asylum, and then it had been an orphanage. When it was an orphanage, there were some doctors there who actually were performing unsanctioned ice pick lobotomies on these children. If the children died, they were burying them on the properties. And so there was just all of this negative energy and activity. It was actually on the registry in West Virginia as one of the most haunted places to visit. What's interesting is in 2009, when I was there, we went looking for it, couldn't find it, and the piece of land looks like nothing has ever been there. And I drove back again this time because, like I said, it's been 11 years, and I wanted to make sure my memory was correct. But I drove out there, and I've got pictures I'll be posting to Facebook, where this building, this was a 3-story brick hospital. This building is gone, and the land looks pristine. I've never seen land reclaimed that well in my life. There's no foundation, there's no remnant of anything at all.
Are we talking Mandela effect here, or?
Well, that's why I drove back, because I would have said that if that were the case. I don't know. I've never seen a building totally demolished and the land look like there's no footprint whatsoever.
There's usually some kind of telltale remnants left,
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And again,
this whole area, though, Bill, it's starting to sound like it's almost like a ground zero, a bit like Boleskine House,
Yeah, very well may be. And I think there are certain points on the Earth that have, certain regions, and for whatever reasons, they are sort of designated as these high hotspots for, anything supernatural.
And I do believe, one of the things that we discovered in talking to the historians about Point Pleasant is that while the Native American tribes would hunt there, they would never live there. They would never set an encampment up or a tribe. They would hunt. But
That's very telling.
They would never settle the lands.
Yeah.
And so we did, there were plans of doing at least another documentary. And we were going to do a follow-up with the specific religious implications. It was going to be called Dark Wings, the Mothman Chronicles, the Dark Messengers, where that we deal with the religious implications. Because, Bill, as you well know, in the film and in the book, the entity of Indrid Cold, it was not associated with Point Pleasant and Mothman per se. That was actually in Mineral Springs, West Virginia, and Woodrow Derenberger, who was having encounters with this entity that called itself Indrid Cold, that would make prophecies and premonitions about tragedies that were going to take place, who claimed to be an extraterrestrial. And then, of course, you have the Flatwoods monster from Flatwoods, West Virginia. So if you look at those locations, you can almost draw a rough Bermuda Triangle inside the state of West Virginia of supernatural paranormal activity that was going on in and around the same time. The Flatwoods monster was early 1960s, Mothman and Indrid Cold into the late 60s.
It's fascinating, brother. It really is. And when you dig into it to the level that you have, boy, oh boy, does it ever become clear that not only, in my opinion and belief, not only did the Mothman phenomena take place there, and probably still continues to this day in perhaps rarer, but again, with the bulk of it moving into the Chicago area and the outlining areas there. But not just that, but just the whole sort of cavalcade of other phenomena taking place, which again, I believe is all linked anyway. But it's very interesting and good for you that you really did the due diligence and really dug into this. And man, it shows.
Well, it's fascinating, and to me, when we got there, and real quickly to answer Kev's question, yes, the plan is to start working on a re-release of the documentary film, and to add some additional footage, to add some archive footage, to add some things that we cut out when we went to release the film, and to also include some special segments that honor and memorialize Charley Mccracken, who was the director and my longtime friend and business partner for many, many years. So that is the plan, to re-release a special edition Dark Wings, the Mothman Chronicles documentary film. But what jumped out at us when we visited Point Pleasant was just exactly how this event forever altered the individuals and the town itself. Because when that bridge collapsed and they were cut off from the rest of the world in many ways, the economy died, the income died there. Only recently have you started seeing franchise type business. It was all locally owned mom and pop. All of the development happened on the Ohio side, in Gallipolis. That's where you had your hotels and your restaurants and things like that. Point Pleasant had to find a way to be self-sustaining. So there was the economic impact, and there was the sociological impact, and there was the psychological impact. And those were the things that really fascinated me about this particular event, was how that it wasn't just something that happened and there were news stories about it and then, oh, well, let's forget about it. No, these people had to live with it for 40, 50, 60, until the end of their lives. And
it sounds to me like the reverberations 60 years on are still being felt. That in itself makes this a really special case. And I hate to use the word special, but makes it unique in many ways, right?
It's very much the similar fallout as Roswell, New Mexico.
Yeah.
Seeing the same thing decades later, and not just the sightings, but how it affected individuals, and how those individuals have affected other people and impacted other lives, and how it's just forever altered with this ripple effect through time.
And think about this. And Kev, I have been there myself. And really the biggest thing going on Main Street there in Point Pleasant is Jeff Walmsley's Mothman Museum. That's probably the biggest attraction on Main Street there. Wouldn't you agree, Travis?
Absolutely. You've got the Mothman Museum. You had Harris's Steakhouse. Carolyn Harris unfortunately passed away just a couple of years ago. That's sitting empty. The Lowe Hotel, the historic Lowe Hotel, is directly across from the Mothman Museum. Up the street, you had the State Theater. This was what broke my heart this year, going up there. The State Theater where we premiered the documentary, it's been shuttered and boarded up and is for sale. Next to it was the Iron Gate Steakhouse, this very upscale dining establishment, and then there were actually two of them. Both of those side by side, they've shuttered and they're for sale. But I would say, yeah, this town right now, its bread and butter is Mothman. And now I know, Bill, you and I have talked, and I had the conversation with L.A. Marzulli. If Mothman is something demonic, and I think, the three of us, and I know L.A. Marzulli's mentality is the same way. It is. Because, when you look, again, going back, Kev, to the question about the hierarchies of angels and demons, there are those principalities,
yep.
those that are given domain over physical locations, certain places that fall into their domain.
True.
And of course, Point Pleasant has a statue that is erected of Mothman. Yes. So the conversation we've had, is this town deifying something that is evil? Are they deifying it and to the point of worshiping? And if so, is this thing that actually is helping their economy and is helping sustain them and keep this town going? Is that a good or a bad thing? And I think
curse at the same time. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think you've got a number of things going on because I'm absolutely of firm belief that this was something in 1966 that people were seeing. And you also mentioned the tulpa as well. So even if we don't have that physical reappearance, we may have almost this manifestation thanks to consciousness in the minds of people around the world, know, and as well as the people in the area. So it's almost it's tethered to that location one way or another, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When you hear Point Pleasant, you think Mothman. Yep. That is their claim to fame. Yeah. For better or worse, that is what they are known for.
So what about UFOs, things like that? I mean, all kinds of things going on, I take it, Travis.
In Point Pleasant, they had a great deal of UFO sightings. Denny Bellamy, who was the director of tourism for many years, not exactly sure if he still is, kind of have not been in touch with him in some time, but he was telling stories when we were interviewing him about UFO sightings that he had been privy to growing up there in Point Pleasant. Other individuals had seen, countless things in the skies there. And like I said, when you look at just the sheer number of things that were happening, Mothman, the hauntings, the animal mutilations on both sides, the Lake State Hospital, haunted houses, that these poltergeist activity, all of this stuff was going on in this town. This is a town of 5,000 people. I mean, we're not talking about DC or Chicago or New York. The other thing was just the massive amount of tragic deaths for a town this size. And going back, and we went to the newspaper and went to the morgue and went through all the stories and just reading about the tragic accidents, car accidents, farming accidents, suicides, murders, and all of this taking place in a very small geographic footprint.
Travis, it's quite uncanny. I've got the kind of goose flesh feeling here because
exactly.
I'm drawing a lot of parallels to where I'm from, Fort Augustus and Crowley's old neck of the woods around Loch Ness, because the village I'm from is about, maybe at the time, approximately 800 to 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
But you would have car crashes, people dying in car crashes, people taking their own lives, people inadvertently taking their own lives through misadventure.
Mm-hmm.
For somewhere so small, like it was a statistical anomaly that you could have so many of these crazy things happening, and it would happen time and time again. And that sounds similar to Point Pleasant,
Charley Mccracken used that exact phrase about Point Pleasant. He said it is a statistical anomaly when you look at the number of tragedies that are taking place in a geographic location this size with the number of people who live here. And the other thing I will say that was very interesting about Point Pleasant, Charley Mccracken had an amazing sense of direction. We could be anywhere in the country, and that man would know north, south, east, west, and he could get us out without GPS or maps or anything like that. You drop that man in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and he became stupid when it came to direction. He could not tell directional location. And it was amazing to watch that happen to him.
It's a jamming of the frequencies and vibrations. Yep. So again, as we've said before, all life operates on frequency and vibration. So if you have the populace there in that area on low, of course, there's going to be confusion, and even the sharpest minds would have this state of confusion due to the frequency and vibration manipulation.
Absolutely.
So, and Travis, how did you feel like going in when you guys the first time you went into the area? Did you feel like you were physically and or spiritually affected?
I didn't feel that initially. I actually, when my daughter said that, she just felt sadness there. And that was the overwhelming feeling that I got the first time we were there. It's an economically depressed location. It's got some very beautiful scenic places. If you've looked at my Facebook page, the River Amphitheater is beautiful. Toowoomba State Park is beautiful. The TNT is absolutely gorgeous. If you enjoy fishing, hiking, and camping, they allow that out there to a certain degree. But it's economically depressed. There's a lot of shuttered buildings. There's a lot of just that feeling of overwhelming sadness that my daughter talked about. Now, over the years of going there, and Bill, you and I have had this conversation personally and in other interviews, I did come under a form of spiritual attack that lasted for many years that impacted myself and those around me. And I don't know if that was Mothman per se, or if it was something at the asylum that attached itself to me, because we, at the time, we were not there as paranormal investigators or paranormal, ghost hunters or anything like that. We were there as a film crew. And as paranormal researchers, I guess would be a better term for us. We were researching a paranormal story, and we were there more as individuals to document what had taken place. So we really did not spiritually prepare ourselves as a lot of teams do today, because I think over the past, we're talking 17 years ago, and even 17 years ago, you didn't find a lot of paranormal investigators that were talking about spiritually preparing themselves for the investigation and then cleansing themselves post investigation.
True.
So we went in with no protection other than a camera and light and sound and recording, and we did capture things, and we unfortunately, at least for me, and I seem to have been the one that was the central target of that, we brought it back.
Not anymore.
No,
and we
not
praise
anymore.
God for that.
Not anymore.
Because Travis was set free from all of that kind of garbage, and we praise God for it. But Kev, I understand 100% what he's saying and how it can happen, because I can't tell you how many people, investigators, have come to me for spiritual assistance that had something like Travis is describing, in that very same way, something attaching to them and literally ruining their life. And God worked through me to help them, and I praise God for it.
Absolutely, brother. Now, when you do the updated version of the documentary, I mean, is there any other people that you weren't able to talk to first time round? Was there anywhere you didn't get access to? What's going to be the big kind of project that you'd like to kind of aim for that?
Well, there's a couple of things. We got to interview everyone we wanted to. We didn't include all of those interviews. So I would like to be able to do that, if possible, go back and include those. I do want to look at the the religious implication, and that may be a separate documentary that we do. I'm not exactly sure. What I'm looking at for this one, Kev, really is to go in and create it in such a way that there are some bonus features. I would love to go in and get some of the outtakes when we're shooting, because, you know, it's a very serious type of project, but there were still outtakes. There were still things that were funny. There were still things that, you know, when you're screwing up the on-camera stuff, you know, stop that. Let's, you know, start all over. Give me, you know, count me in 3. You know, to include some of those types of things. Some still footage, some photographs that have been taken. I know my cousin Matthew had quite a bit of photographs that were taken both digitally and then the old style of development film. There's some in Charley's things. I have some somewhere, and include those in there. Include a lot of things about Charley, some information, some bio, photographs of his family and things like that, and make it a very nice presentation about his life. You know, because, you know, there's Lauren Coleman had, I'm not even sure if the website's still up, but he had a website about the Curse of Mothman, and it detailed individuals who had been infected and impacted by Mothman, and we were on that website for a while. Of course, I was involved in a very serious car accident during the filming of Dark Wings. Charley Mccracken actually became very ill. Probably 2005, 2006. Basically, he had all the symptoms of malaria, but he was not diagnosed with malaria. He was in the hospital for weeks. His organs began shutting down. Just a serious tragedy in that regard. Took a serious toll on his health. And Bill knows when we've done other shows about Mothman, there's always at some point some kind, or hasn't happened recently, but there had always been some kind of electronic interference. Skype would go crazy. I did a show with Naked Zombie Radio out of Australia, and it was a 2-hour segment. First hour broadcast fine, recorded fine. Second hour broadcast fine, but didn't record at all. There was no recording of that second hour whatsoever.
It's funny you say that. I had one of Bill's friends on recently, Steve Hodgson. He's a paranormal investigator, and we use this software that you see right now. That's going out to YouTube. I can click record and record it. We don't need to go live on air. So I done that night. It was myself, Bill, and Steve, and Jen. Everything fine. Got to the end of the show. I couldn't stop recording, just wouldn't stop. And then the whole computer started slowing down. And this thing's like it's top of the range. It shouldn't be having problems with anything at all, Travis. And then I looked at the file size, and what happened was, and I can't explain it, and Steve, he's more proficient on PCs than I am. But what should have been maybe at the most a 1 gig file had taken up over 40 gigs of my hard drive and filled it up to capacity. And I never got any of that show back. Gone.
Wow.
So, sounds crazy.
Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but guys, that's one thing I've really picked up on in the years I've been speaking to authors and researchers, that when you do go down this path of the supernatural and the paranormal, it's hard to come out unscathed. It almost leaves its stains on you. And
it does.
We've all kind of got the scars to show for the work we do by the sounds of it. What do you put that down to, Travis? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. You're kind of putting you on the spot, but do we make ourselves a target by almost being that shining light in amongst the dark?
I think that is definitely part of it. I think we are at our very core spiritual beings more than we are physical beings. And I think that spirituality, that spirit component of us is much bigger than the physical shell that contains it. And I do think that spiritual component is able to reach into and cross barriers and merge with other spiritual components, other spiritual selves. And once that connection is made, whether good or bad, it is a long-lasting connection.
Yep, I like that answer, Bill. Anything to add to that?
No, I totally agree with him. That, and again, this is why it's so very important that even going into this topic this evening, I pray first, and I would never go into any type of topic like this, or personally, in the spiritual warfare that I engage in by the power of God working through me, without praying first and invoking the power of God over the situation. So that's why, and for anybody out there that's tuning in right now, this is why some people might see me as a bit radical or fanatical when it comes to my endless praise and thanks of God, but it's authentic. And I try to be like this with God at all times. Am I perfect? No. Do I claim to be? No. But I truly try to keep my connection with God as strong as I possibly can, so I can invoke his power at any time and any situation and not have to worry about any ramifications because of a situation like this and a heavy topic like this. Again, what's been discussed here is absolutely 100% real, whether you believe it or not or want to believe it or not. You could take it from me based on personal experience that it is authentic. So it is very important that we engage this, certainly from my perspective, making God first, keeping God first, and invoking his power over me and the situation. And that way we are armed, and we'll have a shield here and a sword there.
Warrior mode, Bill. Absolutely. Now, Travis, where can people find Dark Wings? Where's the best place for them to go and see that?
Well, right now it is, I would say, out of print. I am trying to get my hands on one final copy that I know exists. As I mentioned, all of the files had been with Charley Mccracken, and so what I've talked with his widow, Michelle, and she has been kind enough to let me have access to his files, the equipment, and things like that. So what we're going to do is start looking at the individual components as well as the original film that was released, and start building a new version of that. And right now, if they want to follow what's going on, the best way is to follow me personally on my Facebook page as I update what's going on. I did some updates while we were in Point Pleasant, photographs. There's some videos that you'll be able to watch. And then also, in the coming weeks and coming months, the launching of a new website where individuals can go and at least hear some and read some of the first-hand accounts that took place while we were filming this documentary film. And as soon as I get that information published and get the website up and running, I will definitely let you and Bill know so that we can start promoting it on the show.
So, apart from John Keel, I think I've promoted that book umpteen times in the past, but I would imagine there's a few people now really possibly piqued their interest and they're ready to dive down the Mothman rabbit hole. Where would you point them to then, Travis? Where would you say is the best place to look?
I definitely encourage picking up Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies. As I said, reading it as a journal, not as a story, because it's not. You understand
it's not
he's
a story,
working.
That's for sure. No.
It's not. But it does give you a good glimpse into that. I would visit the Mothman Museum's website and check out Jeff Walmsley. He has two books, The Mothman Behind the Red Eyes, and off the top of my head, I forgot the title of the other one. But those are excellent books because they are told from the perspective of someone who is from Point Pleasant, who has stayed in Point Pleasant, who has direct ties to some of the original eyewitnesses, who is a business owner in Point Pleasant, and who is doing his best to make the best out of something that was very horrible and very tragic. There are some really good other documentaries that have been done since we did ours. We were very proud to be the first feature-length documentary about Mothman. There had been small segments done on different TV shows and things like that, but we were the first to actually produce a feature-length documentary. I would definitely also look into Nick Redfern and some of his books. He's got great works on cryptids, as I mentioned, especially the one dealing with winged entities. Linda Godfrey is also another great author who has some books concerning American folklore and cryptids. She wrote The Beast of Bray Road, and she's followed that up with other books chronicling different types of supernatural creatures that appear throughout the U.S. And tying those back, especially many of them back to the Native American mythology. She's got one book, and again, I apologize, it's at my home in London, Kentucky, and I'm actually in Virginia. I don't know, I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but it basically goes through and lists all of the creatures, and it lists them by land, by air, and by air, or land by air and by sea. So you've got Champ, you've got Loch Ness, you've got the Wendigo, you've got Skinwalkers, you've got Mothman, you've got Bigfoot, you've got Sasquatch, you've got Thunderbirds. It's a great book that details not just the history of the creature, but also marries in with that eyewitness accounts.
Boy, Kev, I'll tell you.
I've had Ellie Marzulli on. I've had Nick Redfern.
Marzulli is a good choice, especially from the Nephilim angle.
All I need is Linda Godfrey, and I've got a full house. That's all I need.
Well, Travis, I'm hoping, before we let you go here, I'm hoping that you will, because he always contributes to my books in some way, shape, or form, sometimes writing the foreword or contributing content. And I certainly hope for this upcoming project that I'm about to embark on, Stranger Than Fiction 2, that you will offer a chapter in the book about this very topic. I think it would be very compelling and very interesting for the reader. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you have an open invitation to be a part of it.
I would be very honored. I can expound upon the things we've discussed tonight, as well as the topic that we were working on for the sequel, which is the religious implications, the spiritual implications of Mothman, going deeper into that. So I would be honored to contribute another chapter or two to that book.
Fantastic. Thank you, brother. I'm excited about it. I think that I really believe this second version of Stranger Than Fiction is going to be even better than the first. So very much looking forward to getting that started. The three of us could talk all night long on this topic, and I want to thank you. And I know Kev's going to thank you as well. It's been a real honor and a pleasure, and I want to see you back on with us more often. Anytime, any chance that I get, if you want me, just let me know, and I'll make the time on a Sunday evening to join you guys, and we will discuss whatever.
And I won't interrogate you quite as badly next time, okay? When I get excited, Travis, I get excited with these topics, you know.
Trust me, I took my 16-year-old daughter and 3 of her friends. Your interrogation was nothing compared to the interrogation that I got.
Yeah, I can imagine.
All of them.
So, brother, let people know one last time where to best follow you and keep up to date with everything you're doing on Mothman.
You can follow me on Facebook, Travis Shortt. I'm also on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter. And it's always listed just as my name, Travis Shortt. So you can find me there. Most of the photographs you'll be able to pick out because it's typically the same headshot. It's always with Las Vegas in the background.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. I have really enjoyed speaking to you at long last, Travis. And
it's been a pleasure.
Like Bill said, we'll do it again sometime real soon, okay?
For sure.
You guys let me know, and I know Tia Bell said to tell you both hello, and I know Kev.
Hi to her.
Yeah, I know that she wants to get back on your show. I got somebody else that's very interested in being on your show, and I'll shoot you a message about that as well.
Oh, throw them all my way, Travis. I'm shameless. I will do it. Bring them on.
I will do it.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'll reach out to Linda Godfrey and let her know that you're interested in having her.
Oh, big time, big time. But no, honestly, thank you so much for today. I've enjoyed this. I'm sure the audience will have loved
as well.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much. Always good to talk to you guys.
Thank you, brother. I'll let you get back to it now. And thank Leah as well. She was an absolute star.
Yeah, she was fantastic.
Yeah,
I will do that. A friend of mine from Kentucky, Kevin Horn, messaged me. He was watching and listening, and he said she really needs to have a podcast or something. He said she's got a great voice. He said you need to get her into broadcasting.
Big time.
And she's a brilliant young lady. So yeah, she's a winner for sure.
Big time.
Well, thank you guys very much, and I appreciate it. I see the conversations going on in live chat. I appreciate everyone that was on, and if anybody wants to reach out with questions or comments, they can do so.
Travis, you're a star, and I can't wait to see what you
Yes,
do
he
with
is.
Dark Wings, okay?
Thank you guys very much.
Love
Have a
you,
great
brother. God
Love
bless
you guys
We'll
too.
talk soon.
See you
Sounds
later,
good.
brother. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There we go,
Well-
Bill. That was absolutely phenomenal. Now, don't worry, folks. I
Yeah.
will fix Bill. There he is. There you go. But, Bill, that was awesome, right? I mean,
Better than I thought. I mean, Travis is fantastic. He's a brilliant man and very well spoken. So I knew it was going to go well.
yeah, that whole story, ever since I listened to John Keel's audiobook version of the Mothman Prophecies, and a big shout out to Armand for gifting me that really gave me a new appreciation of a case that I thought I was interested in. But there's so much that goes on round about just that Mothman itself. That might be the central figure, but there's so much activity that kind of spirals out from there. And I think Travis just kind of gave us a little taste of really what it's like to go there, you know?
I totally agree, brother. And I'm excited. Of course, your input into the book and his as well. I really am excited and looking forward to starting very soon, starting work on Stranger Than Fiction 2.
And it will be Stranger Than Fiction Part 1. There you go. It'll be Stranger Than Fiction Part 1.
Yes, for sure it will. Absolutely.
So, Bill,
And
we've done 2 hours there with Travis. Now,
yeah,
we've got some news items that I know you've been keeping your eye on this week.
well, we don't even have to go to those. We could just go to the prayer part, and then we can revisit the news next week.
It would almost spoil all that good information for us to get triggered by these political clowns and
Exactly.
the same dark forces that probably pay homage to something like the Mothman.
Oh, no question about it. So again, it goes right back to what I said earlier about operating on high frequency and high vibration or low frequency and low vibration. And those dark forces, they want people to be on low, and they want to continue to feed them, one garbage thing after another to keep them on low. And trigger is a very good word.
Well, Bill, I will hand it over to you then, and you can work your magic. You can say your prayers. I know there might be some people out there who may be wanting to be included in Bill's prayers. Maybe it might be too short notice tonight, but if you can get in touch with me or Bill during the week on Facebook, or email me, or get a hold of somebody that knows me in Discord, then I know Bill would be more than happy to include anyone
Sure.
in the prayers, wouldn't you, Bill?
Oh, absolutely. And we've got a few people to pray for here that have contacted me, and 2 are family members. And boy, Kev, I'm sad and sorry to say that 2 more of my family members, they live in Louisiana. My second cousin, David Simons, and his wife, Diane, they both have COVID-19, and they're older. You know, David is 83, and I think Diane is somewhere around his age. So
Oh, dear.
I'm very concerned for them, and certainly I want to pray for them and a couple of other people as well. And I want to share also one of as a matter of fact, the latest, most recent testimonial that I have received from one of my clients. And I feel compelled to share it because this poor lady was so down and out in life, and she was had pretty much given up, and God recently worked through me to deliver her, and she is back on high, and she's doing fantastic in her life, and I thank God and praise God for it. So perhaps by me sharing this, it might inspire and uplift some people out there who may be tuning in.
Absolutely, brother. Well, I'll let you take over now, and you take the show where you need to go. I'm all spent after Travis been on. That was like wow, and I can't thank you enough, Bill, for I mean, that's Cheryl last week. We've had Travis this week. I mean, you're knocking it out of the park, man.
We've got tremendous guests that are coming on, and we'll have Laura Calhoun on with us next week to talk about Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker serial killer there in L.A.
That's going to be a really kind of a deep show, that one. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, so we're going to continue to have really, really good and educated guest that can dig deep into these types of stories and present it just in the best way possible. Not that it is a good and happy story, but they are still presenting it as close to the vest and as close to the actual events as possible in relaying the story. So we're always going to strive to continue to find the perfect guest to whatever their topic is, to be really an expert in their topic, just like Travis was here. And that way you can get accurate information from an educated person and a person that really dug into what they were researching. So it's a win-win.
Absolutely. And the audience, you're a huge part of this as well. And me and Bill, we're not perfect.
Yes.
We're not always right. But between the two of us, I reckon we'll be able to at least try and assist you to steer clear of some of the pitfalls, some of the traps, some of the misinfo, the disinfo, the lies, the deceptions. And again, doesn't mean we're always right, but at least we can try and advise you. And me and Bill, we don't do the thinking for you. We just encourage you to think for yourself. Wouldn't you agree, Bill?
I couldn't have said it better myself. As a matter of fact, you always take the thoughts out of my head and the words out of my mouth anyway, so it works in perfect sync.
We're getting used to that, Bill. We're getting used to that, but I'll hand it over to you, brother, and you do what you have to do here. There you go.
Well, again, I want all of you just to start and relax. Just let yourselves go. We're at that part now to where, yes, I'm going to read off some prayer requests, but also I want to get you to kind of just let yourselves go. We've discussed another heavy topic, so it's time to bring you back up on high. And furthermore, I want you to reflect on some things that might be happening in your life. Now, maybe they've been happening for a long time, or maybe it's things that have recently come in. Whatever the case may be, let's trust in God right now to purge this out of your life. And if you feel like you need personal assistance, then don't hesitate to contact me. Visit BillJBean.com. You can email me directly from the site, and we'll get back to you. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And more importantly, by the power of God, we will be able to render assistance to you to get you free from whatever it is that may be bothering you or plaguing you in your life. So without further ado, let's go on to some prayers. Prayer request, and we'll start off again with my second cousin David Simons and his wife Diane, who both have COVID-19. And Father, I ask that you please bless both David and Diane, and bless them both with healing miracles and heal them quickly. And I 100% believe that you will, and I thank you and praise you for it. In Jesus' name, may it be so. And I also want to pray for our good friend Jim Marinos. He's had some issues lately, and he had a heart surgery. And I pray the same thing. Father, please bless and heal Jim quickly and bring him back to 100% health. And I pray the same for Rachel Gecko, who's had a back problem. I pray that God will bless her and heal her and then restore her back and restore her back to perfect health. And I also want to share this testimonial, and I can't tell you how overjoyed I am to know that God worked through me to set this woman free. It's the greatest thing, and it is confirmation to me when I get these types of messages that God truly selected me to work through me in an extraordinary way. Not that I'm extraordinary. I don't claim to be anything. I'm nothing without God and the power of God working through me. And I can never thank him and praise him enough for working through me to help people. So when I get these types of messages, it certainly makes my day, to say the least. And this is from a lady named Roxanne Powers, who I recently had helped, and God worked through me to deliver her from some horrific things. But this is what she wrote. Again, I thank and praise God, Father Yahweh, for you, Reverend Bill. None of this is a coincidence. He sent me to you. He used you powerfully and mightily to do a mighty deliverance in me, to heal me of all my wounds and the great pain that they had caused me, to set me free from the devil's grip, from demonic attachments, from the chains that kept me bound in the invisible prison that I was in for most of my life. From all the captivity I was in accordingly. This brings to mind a great book I used to have a long time ago titled, He Came to Set the Captives Free. I have been longing for this day of this miracle from God all my life, and now it has finally come, and I'm deeply honored that He used someone like you, who He anointed so powerfully and mightily to be one of His mighty warriors, to work through you to do all of this for me. I must tell you again that I believe God has made you one of His commanders in His heavenly armies. I don't think He would mind me saying this to you. I could go on, but you get the gist of it. And thank you, Roxanne, and God bless you. And I'm overjoyed for you that you are free and moving forward in life now. And by the power of God, no one or nothing is going to stop you in this new chapter and new season in your life, moving forward in peace, freedom, and victory. And we give God all the praise and the thanks for that. So just very touching to me. And it brings me a great deal of joy in knowing that God actually worked through me to do that for her. So praise God. So now let's move on to getting all of you out there who may be having some issues right now. Let's get that cleansed from you here and now. So just relax yourselves and let everything go. And visualize in your minds whatever it is that may be bothering you. And again, this could go all the way back to childhood, or it could be something that has just recently come in. Whatever the case may be, let's just focus on it. And while you're doing that, I'm going to pray. Kadash, 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 Yahweh Elohim, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is done in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forevermore. In Jesus' name. And Father, I thank you and praise you for this blessed and appointed time. And I ask that you work through me to help and to take anything and everything that some people out there who are tuning in right now might be going through. And I pray that you'll send your giant warrior angels to them and take into custody every single demon that might be in, on, or around them, and every type of demonic stronghold or attachment or curse, hex, vex, or spell that might be in, on, or around them. And by your mighty power, Father, in your mighty and holy name, in Jesus' name, I bind and break the power over Satan and all his demons, all his fallen angels, all his unclean spirits, all his demonic powers and principalities, all his demonic strongholds and attachments and legal rights and curses, hexes, vexes, and spells, and even family bloodline curses, all ungodly soul ties, and anything and everything that the devil has built over anyone out there that is causing them to have this type of torment that may be taking place now. By your mighty power, Father Yahweh, in your mighty and holy name, in Jesus' name, I declare it all broken off of them, and I command it to depart at once. And I ask that you have your giant warrior angels take all of it into custody and carry it off and deposit it back into the pits of hell where it belongs. Father, we give you the praise and the thanks and the glory for everything forevermore. In Jesus' name. And Kev, I think that's going to about do it for another week here, and it was just fantastic again.
Bill, really enjoying Warrior Mode. It's great how it came about. It wasn't planned, but
no,
it's definitely meant to be. And
yes.
I tell you, the times we're living in right now, I've never seen so many lies, misinfo, disinfo, deception. I was saying how we try and keep people right, but one of my good friends, Lee Veltman, is in the chat room. He's got a really small channel, himself and John Brisson. It's really small because people don't want the truth. most of the time.
Yeah.
Because it's not as sensational. It doesn't have all the Hollywood names and none of the evidence to back it up like a lot of the other channels do. But they've
Yeah.
read the documents, and they will keep you right as much as they can. And I'll point you
Love it.
in that direction of that show. Again, I won't tell you what to think. You don't even have to agree with Lee and John, but please take the time to at least listen to the other side of the story. And then what you decide to do after that, that's totally up to you. But in a time when there is a lot of deception going on, it's good to have people like Lee, John, Bill, myself, others that you can go to. And we don't have an agenda. The
No.
only agenda I've got is me, myself, trying to make sense of what's going on in the world. Because I don't have any of the answers. I'm still trying to figure it out, as we all are. So thanks for letting me just throw that in there, Bill, because that's one channel that's really doing their best to kind
And God
of...
bless them. I wish them well, and I pray that God will continue to work through them to be a blessing.
Yeah, because John, he talks about how he's a Christian as well, and it really gets on his nerves to see people out there, you know, playing the kind of Christian card. Really, in reality, it's just they're aiming at the Christian audience. And,
Correct. You
yeah.
are, and correct he is.
So I think that's a sign of the times that we're in as well, though, right? Because deception, doesn't it say in that book that men will be deceived?
Even the very elect.
Yeah.
And so this, again, I can't state this strongly enough. This is why it is so very important to have a real and authentic relationship with God. The closer you draw to him, the closer he will draw to you. And the closer that he draws to you, the more he will increase your holy discernment. So you will know who is real, who is not, what is true, what is not, and how to act accordingly to that. Because if you are truly following God, then he will always present the truth right before your eyes, and your eyes will be that big. So please take my advice, and you don't have to believe a word I say, but I urge you to do the research for yourself, and more importantly, establish a real and authentic relationship with God and his son, Yeshua Jesus the Christ.
Well, it's been awesome. It really, really has. I'm looking forward to next week. Quickly, who's the guest going to be again?
We're going to have Laura Calhoun next week, and she'll be talking about Richard Ramirez, the serial killer that was known as the Night Stalker out there in Los Angeles.
Oh, this is one I kind of know about.
Yeah.
So she better be ready for me interrogating her.
Yes,
I'll
it'll be
be
another
gentle,
fascinating
Bill.
show.
I'll be gentle, but I want to thank...
You were perfect this time. You'll be perfect again.
I want to thank everyone for being here today, and remember, as soon as we get off this show, get into full warrior mode. Faith, strength, and courage. Until next time, folks, take care and God bless. And remember to follow Bill over on Facebook, on Twitter, at his website, billjbean.com. And we will see you next week.